invites you to Eagle Day 2024 on Friday, March 15th. There will be something for everyone from the expo and interactive fun sessions from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. to the art and wine sessions in the evening from 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Don't miss out on our very special information sessions which start at 10 a.m. Whether you are a prospective student who wants to learn more about Galen University, a current student wanting to enjoy the Galen Eagle spirit, or a Galen Eagle alumni looking for an engaging way to reconnect with colleagues, this is your opportunity. Save the date and bring a friend to Eagle Day 2024 on March 15th at our main campus in Central Farm. For more information, give us a call at 615-3129. My life, my education. Galen University, my choice for excellence in education.
Yes, good night and welcome back to the Galen Hour. Our topic tonight is digitization, e-governance, and good governance. As you know, this season is being done in collaboration with the Ministry of Economic Development. And we have our guests in studios, and I just introduced them. And so we want to get our show started. And we have Miss Alexia Peralta coming in virtually, and I'd like to start with her. And Miss Peralta, could you kindly share with our viewing audience what the responsibilities of your unit is? Mm-hmm.
Certainly. Thank you so much for inviting me to this session to really be able to share about the work of the department and, of course, of the ministry. So in 2020, the administration, the government really chose to take an innovative approach in ensuring that we're fulfilling the mandates of even today from the Belize medium-term development strategy and ensuring that we are able to achieve the principles of efficiency, accountability, transparency. And in so doing, they saw electronic government, or as it's commonly understood, e-governance, as an opportunity to really achieve those principles of governance. And in doing so, they established our ministry, the Ministry of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics, and e-governance portfolio, and our department to be able to support the execution and implementation of those initiatives. In this case, the initiatives are defined by our National Digital Agenda, which was implemented in 2022, and it's a 4-year modernization plan that really details the roadmap or the direction for Belize in wanting to become a digital country, in wanting to ensure that the government is becoming very more proactive and that the government itself becomes a digital government. So the e-governance and digitalization department is really the agency responsible in government to support the implementation of that agenda, but overall to be able to champion, lead, support all of the elements of e-governance and to achieve the government's vision of becoming a digital government, and by extension, of course, being able to achieve the vision of becoming one day a digital Belize.
Beautiful. Thank you for that introduction into what you do. We look forward to hearing more about the milestones achieved as well as synergies with the Good Governance Unit. Mr. Cesar Ross, if you would kindly tell our viewing audience what your unit does.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Good night, listening audience. Like the e-governance department, the Good Governance Unit is a creation out of, straight out of the Plan Belize medium-term development strategy, where the government has laid out certain foundational elements it wants to focus on in improving governance in Belize, in making governance in Belize much more accountable, much more transparent, much more receptive and participatory with the citizens of Belize as such. And so the Good Governance Unit was created in early 2021. Myself as director and a small unit of very young, talented individuals. And we were pretty much given 3 major mandates. One is being the secretariat of the Constitution reform process. So the People's Constitution Commission at its creation had the Good Governance Unit becoming its secretariat. So we are the secretariat of the PCC, and dealing with all the type of logistics and assisting the PCC facilitates its mandate. The other mandate is also to develop a good governance agenda for the country of Belize, a medium to long term, so anywhere from 5 to 10 years planning to facilitate that. And then the third agenda is to onboard all anti-corruption commitments / conventions that the country has with international, with the OAS, with the United Nations. And so we have been since day one, working very strongly with the UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, who is the Secretariat for the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and with MESISIC, which is the Secretariat for the OAS Inter-American Convention Against Corruption.
Thank you, Cesar. Acronyms, I mean, so I'm glad you're here to explain all of what they mean. All right, so let us get into our conversation tonight. So if we could start with you, Ms. Peralta, what are the priority areas right now as it relates to the digitization of the public service? And I know this is a big topic, and everybody's looking forward to where we're going with our digitization of our public service and our government.
No, certainly. I mean, the digitalization of services for government is definitely a top priority, and it's actually one of the priority pillars within the National Digital Agenda. Within the agenda, or 4-year agenda, it really highlights the need to digitalize the civil registry, which is an ongoing project that's being supported by the department and being executed in parallel with the Attorney General's Ministry and the Biostatistics Unit. So that is one of our flagship projects, I would call it, in ensuring that we're delivering those very critical, vital services to citizens. And very soon, our citizens will be able to experience being able to access those services online. We're also working in parallel with the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Police Department in digitalizing for the Record of Conduct certificate application, and that will also be streamlined this year and available for our citizens. We're working with the Inter-American Development Bank to implement an e-services platform. I really like to call it the Amazon of services for government. Citizens will be able to access this platform and be able to see all the variety of services that you interact with government today in one platform, in one window, and allow you to be able to easily access now government services from anywhere at any point. Of course, those are only some of the services, but when we talk about electronic governance or digital government, there is really 3 clients that we have. We have the public, of course, and some of those areas that I highlighted are some of the priority areas that the government highlighted because of the level of impact that it has and the necessity, of course, that we saw in being able to support the transformation of those services. But second to that is, of course, our own employees. As a digital government, we also need to be able to have efficient and automated processes within our own operations. So we're currently actually at this phase launching what is being called My GOB platform. It's a centralized platform, likewise, that will allow for government employees, public officers, to be able to access services from the government, for example, their vacation leave, maternity leave, etc. So really and truly driving that as a digital government, we're not just seeking to improve services that we deliver to our citizens or that we deliver to businesses, such as companies, but that we're also aiming to improve the delivery of services to our own clients, to our own internal employees. And I think those are important stakeholders that we need to also be able to be part of the process. So those are some of the public services that are currently being tackled in parallel with our key stakeholders in government, but nonetheless, really and truly, the digital agenda really highlights the need for Belize to one day have all of its services. I must say that we have based our initial understanding about 300 plus services that the government offers to citizens. So it's going to be a process to take us there, but we've certainly begun that process, and we're certainly excited to support all the ministries in being able to have those services online and ensuring that they're easy to use, they're efficient, they're timely, and of course that it really meets the needs of our citizens, and that the citizens and the users are at the forefront of how we deliver those services.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sure it will be a day of celebration when we're actually able to go online and access a lot of the services that we now have to actually step into office to do or take a hard copy of something to do. So we certainly look forward to that, and we do understand and appreciate it's a process in place. Mr. Sessa, would you want to chime in here and help us to understand how what you do in the Good Governance Unit ties in with what is being done in the e-commerce and digitalization unit?
Yes, sure. And it's good to see Ms. Peralta again. Last year we had a session, both of her department and our unit, looking at how our good governance agenda and e-governance ties into it. And likewise, she was looking at how e-governance and their good governance agenda, the synergy that occurs, because very importantly, in governance, transparency, responsiveness to the people is what drives good governance, and so it drives trust, and that's one of the things that we need to build, because it's there are a lot of doubters. There's always the mistrust in what government is doing and what public servants are doing. And so this e-governance and good governance synergy, we're hoping will sort of ameliorate that distrust and bring about a better customer service interaction between the people of Belize and the government of Belize as such.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So maybe we could spin off of that and ask you to share with us, what do you see as some of the most pressing constitutional issues facing Belize today?
The People's Constitution Commission is going through a process of reaching out to the citizens of Belize, both in country and in the diaspora, to get to both inform and to get an understanding of what are the concerns of Belizeans in general. And so that outreach we have reached the point where now we're looking at recommendations. The People's Constitution Commission are looking at what are the recommendations, the consultation that Belizeans want to see reflected in our constitution reform process. And so that's where we are, and we have seen several areas where concerns are. One of the primary areas is in the fundamental rights, right? One of the first chapters of the Constitution of Belize, whereby people are trying to understand what are the fundamental rights we have. It's sort of unfortunate to know that a lot of Belizeans don't understand and have not really looked at their Constitution in any great detail. And so the understanding of what we have, and then the challenge of certain rights that they feel that they are supposed to get, which would then means that the proposal would then be to add other fundamental rights. Because one of the things we talk about, for instance, as educators, is that we look at the fundamental rights and we don't see a fundamental right to education within that those lists of fundamental rights. And the question that I ask is, do people feel that that should be a fundamental right that is provided to all Belizeans and people living within the territory of Belize as such? No? Primary health care, right? Should that be a fundamental right that people should, because it's not listed in there, right? A fundamental right to a home, to a house, to land. It's not the fundamental rights talks about the protection of your property, but it doesn't talk about how you will acquire. How do Belizeans make sure that they have an ability to acquire that property? So that is one area that is in the consultation we have done, people have brought up. Another area is the structure of government, right? The structure of government, how we are governed, and the powers, the distribution of those powers as such. Right? We have three branches of government, but are they three equal branches of government? We have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And so people are concerned about that process and how much does the Constitution ensure that that is so, that there is that distribution of importance. And the third area is one of the things they have complained about a lot is they say we have, the code of conduct is a beautiful code of conduct in our Constitution. And civil servants and public officials, elected public officials, raise their hand and commit to being fair and impartial and all of that. And the people say, but it's not happening. And if it's not happening, then what? What is there in the Constitution that holds people's foot to the fire to make sure that they live up to those commitments as such? So they want to see. They want to see that built into the Constitution.
This is certainly a monumental task to be taken on. I imagine, and at the end of this, is it possible that we could see a whole different constitution? Or certainly one that is improved on, maybe? Yeah. So we look forward to the process and certainly to hearing more from you. Ms. Peralta, talk to us a little bit about some of the major achievements of the implementation of the National Digital Agenda to date. What are some of your achievements and milestones?
I mean, certainly in parallel with good governance principles, and I'm certain Mr. Ross would appreciate, is the element of inclusion. When we talk about taking government online, we also need to think about how inclusive are we making and how accessible are we making it. So one of our flagship projects that we're very proud of is our digital inclusion program. One of the major elements is establishing digital connect centers around the country, which are really access hubs for now citizens who may not have the ability to access the internet or devices. They now have at their fingertips the ability to access government service, information, or even just utilize it for their own economic gain. These resources free of cost for them. We've established 15 of these centers across the country in both rural and urban areas. And we're also conducting digital literacy trainings for youths, and we'll also be doing so for seniors. So this is one of the projects that we're very happy that it is being very much taken up by the respective local governments within these different villages and towns. But apart from that, of course, we've worked heavily on improving the legal framework, the policy framework, because of course, when we talk about good governance, digital government, it has to come from somewhere. There needs to be that basis that really defines what does e-governance mean for Belize. And that is really what your policy and legal framework is. So we've worked significantly in passing 6 new legislations along with our partners like the Economic Development Council that helps to now define some of these parameters, but also helps to ensure the element of safety, helps to ensure that there is the protection of human rights when we're going into digital government, the protection of data, the protection of privacy. So again, you see the connection with good governance, and you see the connection with the principles of good governance. Apart from those major areas, of course, we've been able to do pilot projects with other ministries, such as piloting online payments for government services. Again, we're trying to ensure that the solutions that we're providing are solutions that really meet the needs of our citizens, and recognizing that we do have a large unbanked population. We piloted mobile wallets, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, as a means to do online payments for government, so that now you don't have to go to a government building just to pay for a service. And we're piloting it with different services and very soon they will be more accessible and being able to be utilized much more. Of course, we've done a lot of capacity building in government, outside of government, to ensure that in this entire process, we're really bringing everyone along with us and we're really leaving no one behind in this process. I mentioned it earlier, some of our biggest milestone as well is the launch of the centralized platform for government for services. Now that government itself will be leading and government itself will be showing that online services brings those benefits of good governance, of efficiency, of accountability, of transparency. So we're really aiming to lead by example. And it's not finished yet, but it's very close to finish. So we're very happy again, and I need to highlight the strengthening civil registry program and how much that's going to make a difference, because how much that's going to support us as a government to ensure universal access to identity. And of course, that sets the basis for us as a country for the first time to have a national ID. We already have a national ID strategy that sets in place how we're going to do it, but we needed to ensure that there was first that fundamental right available. And that's why the focus was civil registry, but very soon we will begin to engage to now look at how can we now take that major step as a country in having a national ID platform that allows very easy access to services, as we've seen the benefits in other nations. So those are just some of the activities and projects that we've been able to achieve thus far.
This is very exciting. Thank you. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So, Sister, you mentioned rights and a right to education. I hear Ms. Peralta talking about the digital divide. We're talking about digitalization, and we really need to make sure that even our remotest of villages have access. I know when it comes to education, since Galen is in that sector, we have some teachers and students who struggle when it comes to having access to internet, and the remoteness of where the villages are. And so also it brings up the issue of how do we foster digital societies, and what does it really mean for us, right? And I know these are some of the things that are on your plate, Ms. Peralta. It certainly are exciting times.
Yes, they are.
Certainly are exciting times for us here in Belize. I think it would be even a bigger deal than the Newhall Overbridge. I had to bring it up because Belizeans certainly enjoyed that.
Much more connectivity than the bridge.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, how do you see constitutional reform improving our governance structure and benefiting the citizens of Belize? Mr. Ross, you want to share us just a little bit on that?
Well, following from Ms. Peralta's highlight, I think very key, as she pointed out, is the inclusion, the inclusiveness and the responsiveness of government. And so the Good Governance Unit is both the Secretariat and the People's Constitution Commission, but it's also the Good Governance Unit of the Government of Belize, which means that we have multiple agendas, and it's interesting when listening to Ms. Peralta when she talks about inclusiveness, because I think that's the same focus that we have both in constitution reform, and one of the things that I always try to highlight to Belizeans, our government undertook a challenge that many other governments did not. Jamaica, for instance, created a Constitution Reform Commission, but it's a technical commission. In other words, it brought lawyers and constitutional experts together, 14 members, to do the work, to do the reform process as such. No? And they will consult, but they're the writers. In Belize, our government decided ambitiously, maybe too ambitiously, to create a stakeholder commission. I mean, that's a very, very difficult undertaking, because you are talking about trying to bring in stakeholders, representative of organizations and agencies across this country, right? And stakeholders that themselves needed first to become aware, to become comfortable with constitution and constitution reform. before they themselves could then launch a public outreach as such. No? So that inclusiveness of trying to bring in stakeholder organizations that represent the different areas of Belize as such, both geographic and thematically as such, whether you have the churches and the LGBT community, whether you have the political parties, and we were emphatic that it was not only about the PUP and the UDP, but the third parties have their commissioners. You know, whether we talk about the Creole councils, the Maya councils, we talk about the unions, civil society, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Bureau. So much different representation. It's a challenge because it's a headache with all these representation, but it's also fulfilling because they're bringing their constituencies to the table. And so while I've noticed that other countries have difficulty when they put their proposals out to the public, when we put ours out to the public, it will be a proposal that came from the public. So the buy-in should be much stronger, should be much more, ours should be much more successful in the long run as such. So that inclusiveness. And the same thing with our good governance anti-corruption agenda. We had on December 7th, the first national anti-corruption conference held in Belize, where we had stakeholders from government and non-government agencies coming together and putting together a sort of a declaration, an agenda that they want to see drive the good governance agendas. You know, so it's all of them coming together. This
is fantastic. It is, and so we're hoping that we don't hear the cry of the people saying we were not consulted.
Exactly.
We were engaged. We have a stakeholder. Stakeholders are involved in this reform process. Right, so we are at the halfway mark for tonight. Whenever the conversation is good, the time goes fast. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with the Galen Hour. Stay tuned.
With our unique student-focused services, Galen University prides itself in doing everything possible to facilitate the success of our Galen Eagles. The flexible payment plans, student loan options, and Eagle scholarships make Galen affordable, accessible, and attractive. Treat yourself to the gift of a Galen education. Apply today and secure your spot. Come soar with the Galen Eagles. Visit our website at www.galen.edu.bz or give us a call at 615-3129 or 614-6415 for more information.
Welcome to the Galen Hour. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we have with us the Director of Good Governance, Mr. Cesar Ross, and the Director of E-Governance and Digitalization Department, Ms. Alexia Peralta. Mr. Ross is in the studios. Ms. Peralta is joining us remotely. Quite an interesting conversation, and the topics are certainly relevant to all of us Belizeans. But before we get into our second segment and conversation, it's a short video that we wanted to share on behalf of the E-Governance and Digitalization Department. So we'll take a minute or so to share that video.
So my role within the unit is a project officer. So I'm in charge of all the technical background work that goes on.
Officially it's to be the director, but really and truly in my day-to-day operation is to be that bridge between my unit and our colleagues across the public sector, but even with the private sector, even with the community. Change makers. What we're doing here is really going to transform and change the way, not just the way government operates, but the way as a country we operate.
The most exciting part about working with the unit is the fact that you don't have a set schedule. So while you may come into the office today, tomorrow you might be out in a rural village. I'm doing a site visit for a future digital connect center. Or you might be meeting regular people on the street, just getting their feedback on what they need for the advancement of digitalization in Belize.
We spend a lot of time learning the needs of the communities, and in doing so we build connections, we build bonds, we build relationships.
We are trying to bridge the digital divide that exists in Belize. by providing access to both technological devices, but also access to government services through centers like the Digital Connect centers.
We're the wave that's building up the momentum to create that change that we all want to see across government, at home, a different Belize, one that really allows for everyone to benefit and to grow.
Yes, so we got a little bit more of the view into how into the team at our e-commerce and digitalization unit. So it was actually interesting to see what you do a little bit more, Ms. Peralta. But now, coming off that particular video, I'd like to ask you then, what do you see as the role of the IT and e-government in helping to eliminate corruption? Corruption always being a relevant and hot topic for us for discussion. So if you could just share with us how your unit and what you do can help with the elimination of corruption.
Of course. Certainly, as you rightfully said when we began this session, there's such e-governance and good governance is such an interrelated topic. Whenever we think about digital government, we might think more about the digital element or the electronic element, but really and truly, the meat of the matter is governance. It's how does a government govern? How does a government operate? How is a government, as Mr. Ross indicated, how is it more responsive? How is it more proactive? How is it more transparent? So when we think about how ICT as a tool can really benefit or eliminate corruption and to be able to improve governance, really and truly, we're talking about how can ICT as a tool, as a mechanism, be utilized to achieve the principles of good governance, the principles of inclusiveness, the principles of transparency, the principles of efficiency, accountability. By having systems online, it really helps to be transparent in the process of these services, for one, but two, it also allows the transparency for both the citizen and for the government to be able to know where are we in the process, what is the status, how do we communicate more efficiently. So having systems in place such as the e-government portal that I spoke to earlier is really going to support transparency. But beyond that, having platforms where you can share information openly, where information is readily available by citizens, empowers the citizenry. It gives them the ability to know and to hold their own government accountable. So it really begins to strengthen that mechanism of accountability and the mechanism for citizens to be more engaged. And then as part of that process, of course, begins to eliminate some of the ability for corruption to exist, because an empowered citizen, and I'm sure Mr. Ross would agree, really helps to create those mechanisms of accountability, those mechanisms of transparency. But even beyond that, having services online means that it's a government that's responsive. It's a government that recognizes and understands what is necessary for its users. And that's also a big element of being able to provide better governance and being able to be better effective. And the element of having ICT, of course, is making sure that services are closer to home. So now, from the comfort of your home, you will be able to access these services. You won't need to go to any government building, etc. So the element of inclusivity in bringing those services closer to home is also very important when we're talking about good governance. So I think the work that we're doing in the department, across the government, in utilizing ICT is really going to help us as a government to achieve all those principles of good governance in reality, in practice. And I strongly believe that the citizens will then be able to benefit and see that ICT is that tool that's available today to allow us to be able to achieve that joint vision that we all want, and at the same time begin to address some of the challenges that we all know as well exist when it comes to the areas of corruption. So ICT really enables our vision to achieve that. And I just want to highlight what Mr. Ross indicated about building trust. I love that he actually said it because the actual goal of the National Digital Agenda that we stated we would achieve in 4 years is to build trust in government services. So even in the goal, we were very much aligned with how we see ICT, electronic government, improving the ability of good governance and achieving good governance and ensuring that as a government we're improving our mechanisms for governance, and that improves and that includes service delivery, that includes being proactive, that includes being open and having information accessible for our citizens, and of course that means being effective decision makers in utilizing the data that's available to make ethical and fair and efficient decision making. So ICT also now empowers our decision makers with a tool, with the data, to be able to make the decisions that will allow better effectiveness and better value for our citizens.
Fantastic. I know it's tax season is coming up. Is your unit behind Iris and the infrastructure that we now have to, because if I'm not mistaken, this tax season we all have to use the online platform, right? Iris, right? Yeah. So those are some of the infrastructure your unit would help other agencies with or other ministries with. And then also I know recently the corporate registry went through where you have to do a re-registration. And I'm assuming it's for digital purposes as well?
That's correct. Well, we certainly support the vision of all ministries in having services online, but I must give credit to my colleagues, Ms. Michelle at the Belize Tax Service. They've really led and championed their initiative in taking this tax service online and making it digital. Likewise, my colleague, the registrar, Mr. Santiago, in leading the company's registry digital transformation there as well. So I think these two agencies have very strong champions that have really led their reform process, but nonetheless, we are here and we have supported them in the areas that they have sought that support from us, and of course, we support other ministries likewise in all of their transformation processes.
Yep. Yeah, we're beginning to see the changes, and it's welcome. I mean, often change is met with a little bit of resistance, maybe more than we want, especially if we're not as savvy with technology, right? Yeah. Particularly, but that's the way of the world. So we do applaud all that you're doing and the direction that the government is going. Indeed, it's inevitable. So if we could come back, talk a little bit more about good governance. How will you ensure the voices of the marginalized, the underrepresented groups are heard when it comes to the reform process? Yeah.
And it's very important, and you are right, and Ms. Peralta is right. We're at a time in Belize where I am glad that the government is open to all these recommendations, is open to this process. I mean, has pushed the envelope to create better governance systems as such, and opens themselves to recommendations coming from the people, because that's you're opening yourself up to a serious challenge when you do that. But yes, the reform, and there's the declaration that was produced. I think is a strong and a wonderful declaration that came from the civil and public sectors, and the business sector, and basically, like Ms. Peralta is saying, the good governance unit is working at making sure that we hear what the people is saying. The People's Constitution Commission is working at making sure that every sector and every community, no matter how remote or how marginalized they are, that they have a voice in this process. So all of this signals sort of a transformation in allowing the participation, and not only participation, but the setting of an agenda by these communities. And so it's wonderful, and our unit is looking at the strategy, and we are working at developing a good governance strategy that will result from an assessment, and that assessment has to come by talking to the rank and file of individuals within the government system, within the statutory created bodies, within the village councils, in the municipal systems. And so it's opening up to get all of the information. It's a bottom-up process that we're seeing. It's a change that will signal in, will herald in, and this declaration has been presented to Cabinet, and Cabinet has said, go ahead. They have, okay, let's see all of this occur, right? It's good what is coming forward, but no, let's see it occur, right? And so.
Yes.
So we're fortunate, we're glad that we have a government that is, allowing all this to occur and to have the people speak up to these topics and these agendas.
Inclusivity is indeed a key factor in all that we're talking about tonight. Yes. And certainly we want our people to be involved. I mean, like you said earlier, it creates ownership of the process and of the outcome of the process. I want to ask this very same question to you, Ms. Peralta. I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit in a previous response that you'd given or this earlier part of the discussion. How is your unit ensuring that the marginalized and the underrepresented are becoming part of that transformation and reform that the e-governance and digitalization unit is bringing to Belize and to our government?
No, certainly. The digital inclusion program is really our main activity in how we're ensuring that the marginalized or those most vulnerable are part of this transformation process. As Mr. Ross indicated, it's really about ensuring that everyone has the accessibility, but also the capacity to engage in the process. And one of those ways, of course, as I indicated, is having the availability to access the internet, the availability to be connected to your government. By being connected, then you can participate. And that's what we're now doing. But as part of that, of course, is providing digital literacy programs, because the idea is to ensure that we're empowering those who are marginalized, the vulnerable, to be part of the process. And in order to do so, I like to say we need to speak the same language, not literally, but certainly when we're talking about the ICT realm, we do need to have some common ground so that we can effectively engage and we can effectively communicate and be able to really design those programs that are most effective for you. So that's certainly one of the major projects that we're executing to ensure that no one is left behind, that we're ensuring that we're putting all the measures in place to allow inclusivity to always be a continuous part of our process. But besides that, I just want to highlight as well that part of the design of our services, and you'll get to experience them very soon this year, is we're placing a lot of emphasis on accessibility, a lot of emphasis on usability. So being able to see the systems in dual language, for example, you'll be able to see them in Spanish too. For those who might have challenges still with the English language, you'll still be able to engage in Spanish. For different accessibility challenges that may exist, the systems are being designed to take that into consideration. So we're ensuring that as we go online, we're not creating additional areas of marginalization, and that we're really closing that gap as we go online, not just accessibility, but usability, friendliness. All of those elements are really being embedded into the services that government will be taking online to ensure, again, that no one is left behind and that we're providing all the platforms necessary to ensure that we are inclusive in this process of transformation.
This is really exciting. Thank you for sharing such valuable information. I hope our viewing audience really paying attention to what's being shared here tonight. We certainly should not say that we're not being looked after and that our best interest is not being looked to being improved. And also, we certainly cannot say we are not being encouraged to be part of the constitutional reform. However, we want to also ask and talk a little bit more about what are the strategies that you propose, your unit is proposing, Mr. Amras, for ensuring transparency and accountability.
Yes. One of the, as Ms. Peralta was talking about, speaking the same language, or at least trying to make sure we understand each other. In August of last year, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime scheduled a visit to Belize to listen, to hear what is Belize doing when it comes to preventive measures in corruption, one of the chapters of the UNCAC. And we decided that rather than sit with them, or a few of us sitting with them, let's find all the institutions and agencies that speak to preventive measures, to speak with them, to be part of that session. 22 different agencies within government and the different parts of government. 22 different agencies have in their agenda, in their mandate, speaking to preventive measures of corruption.
Wow.
And we were able, and we made sure that UNODC realized that and scheduled enough time, because enough time to sit with all of these agencies. So one of the things that came out of that is that we need some type of institutional framework, that we are not, these 22 different agencies are not working as silos, not working separate and reinventing the wheel, that there's some way we work together, and we're able to ensure that we bring in that the discussion then becomes much more open, that what the Integrity Commission or the Financial Intelligence Unit or the Ombudsman or the Good Governance Unit or the Financial Service Commission, there are so many different, and the NTUCB, National Trade Union Congress of Belize, and Belize Chamber of Commerce, everybody are pushing an agenda of good governance. So how do we create the synergy that we are able to then open it up and do it much more transparent, much more accessible, much more inclusive of people and such. So that is a challenge, but also an exciting thing to see occur when you sit with all of these.
Yeah, all of these parties and stakeholders, right? How is the reform on both ends being received? How are people, when they're invited to a stakeholder consultation, what's the reception? Are they showing up? Are we seeing enough involvement and engagement from our Belizeans?
The different strategies that the PCC use, and the PCC has acknowledged and recognized that they need different strategies, that some people respond to public meetings and becoming involved, but that in some areas, members of the public have said, please use social media. Let's interact using social media. And so the PCC has opened that avenue. And so what is the interaction where in some areas, in the initial process, we felt there was not enough responsiveness, not enough people coming out. When we opened the social media, we saw much more involvement, much more interaction. We're still hoping to reach certain thresholds, and so there's the PCC has launched a process of, submit, give us what are your recommendations, has opened up to that process of getting people to respond as such, and all stakeholders have been invited to please, whether you sit on the commission or you don't sit on the commission, please submit and tell us what you want to see in this reform process.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, this is really positive and good to hear, and I'm hoping our people do make it their business. It's our business, to put forth their concerns and their contributions, and learn a little bit more about what's going on. Like you said, I think earlier in our discussion off screen, many people had never really looked at the Constitution before. So now is a good time to do so and to become involved and engaged. Ms. Peralta, from your end, in terms of educating our people to ensure that we can have a successful transformation in the digital era and a digitized government. Um, how are you seeing reception and um, how
I,
even the public servants? I know sometimes people are resistant to change. Um,
no, I agree. And you said it earlier, change is not easy. Change is sometimes frightening. And really resistance sometimes comes from fear or the lack of understanding, or sometimes even just simply the lack of communication. Um, and of course, in every change process, there is bound to have early adopters who will immediately gravitate and said, yes, this is great. Let's go. We're ready to go. We're ready to roll. And there's some that might be more hesitant, more concerned, and that's okay. That's a natural part of any change process that's occurring. What we do, like the good governance, is using various strategies to try to address those barriers that present themselves to people being able to easily adopt. In the case of public servants, actually with Mr. Ross' parent ministry, the Ministry of Public Service, we had launched a training program for public officers on digital transformation. It was a 4-week process. Actually, various members of his team participated. We were always supporting and engaging with each other, and whereby we really, again, try to ensure that we're talking that same common language. So for 4 weeks, we provided the basic training in what is digital transformation, what are some of the best practices, what are some of the tools that are available that can be used for them to begin to lead their change processes within their ministries, and ensuring that while they're doing so, that it's really aligned overall to the government's agenda and overall to the government's vision. So that's one way. The second way, of course, is ensuring that the public is part of the process. And in order to be part of the process and in order to engage, you need to know what the process is. So like the Galen Hour, we had the Digital Spotlight podcast that was launched last year, where we broke down what is the national digital agenda. We explained it. We talked about how it's going to impact people, how they can, what are some of the differences they can expect to see, how it's going to improve their lives. Of course, how some challenges might present itself, but what are the corrective measures or the preventative measures that we're taking to ensure that those do not present themselves like they have in other countries. But even beyond that, we've hosted webinars with Girls in ICT Day. So we invited different girls from high school. We opened it up for an online webinar. We invited schools. And the idea was really to be able to ensure that girls were part of the conversation. When we think about ICT, girls are one of the marginalized groups. They're one of the vulnerable groups that many times we forget. In the entire world, women only represent less than 19% of the ICT field. So for us, we try to ensure that we brought those girls in, we listened, we heard from them what are their challenges that they face in becoming involved in ICT, in e-governance, and also ask them what are the solutions that they think needs to be put in place to support them, because they have the solutions, they experience it, and many times they know how to fix it. So now we're actually taking those solutions and we're going to look at how it's created into programs to really be able to address um, the issues that were presented. So really taking that grassroots approach in developing those programs and ensuring that they're part of the process, and of course ensuring that we're keeping everyone engaged and that everyone is aware of the process is very critical and important if we're trying to ensure that it's a smooth transition for everyone. And of course, we've done other campaigns, we've done radio shows, etc. So different strategies and social media. Of course,
Yeah.
everyone's on social media. So social media is one of our best friends in really helping to carry the message across and really being able to communicate effectively with different groups in the country.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think you both touched on the fact that using different mediums and channels to reach our population and the different target segments in the country. Um, we're almost out of time. This has been a very enlightening, very engaging, very promising conversation from both angles, reform of our political and constitutional reform, as well as looking at the digitization and that reform and what it's going to bring to our nation, our government, our people, even our public sector. So I want to thank you so very much for joining us tonight. I do know we need to be off air by 9 o'clock. You know it's us standing in between the Bolida, right, and the Lactree. So we can't, you know how Belizeans are. But it is always a pleasure to be here with you on a Wednesday night. The Galen Hour is a production of Galen University. This season has been done in collaboration with the Ministry of Economic Development. We have focused on the medium-term development strategy. This is our last topic that we would be night of a topic. When we meet again next week, Wednesday, it is to wrap up and to look at all that we have covered. So we've actually had the opportunity to speak to a vast array of ministries, CEOs, directors, and we've looked at all of the, I'll call them pillars, in the medium-term development strategy. And so tonight, it is a pleasure to end off the topics with both of you, because this is really where we're going, and everything else kind of fits in to where we're going with, in terms of digitization as well as political and economic reform. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight. I thank you for joining us, to our viewing audience. I say stay tuned. Look out for us for next Wednesday. And the Galen Hour continues next week. And we are always looking for new and interesting topics to share with you. So thank you for joining us. See you next week, Wednesday, same place, same time. Have a good night.